Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arte. I'm David.
And I'm Mark. And as brothers, we grew up telling stories together for over 15 years. And as adults, we want to continue telling stories together. And we want to invite you into our brothers' brain trust.
Yeah, we started this podcast to share the beginning of our story, the stories that influenced us, the people that we were admiring, and then to continue writing that story together, as Mark said. And some of the ways we do that, we build a community through social media, through different events, and through different storytelling opportunities. We interview creatives who are better at what they're doing than we are, so we can learn from them and just grow from the knowledge that they have, the experience they have, and be encouraged by what they've learned about creativity in the Lord. And then another way that we build this community is by having story writing prompts. And Mark, what's a good way to describe those episodes? They're kind of like 2.0, like Arte 1.0, but reimagined, I guess. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, they're kind of a callback to kind of what we did at the beginning of the podcast, but they are something that we're doing currently. I think we refer to them as our fun episodes, but that doesn't really sum them up because all the episodes are super fun. So, but they're just something that we do. They're almost our personal work inside the podcast platform. So
yeah. Let's not get too meta with the levels there, but you're exactly right with that. So today's episode is hilarious to me because we, for 4.5 years, or for 4 years, we would do an every 6 months update on progress of where we were as people and as a brand. And then we got so busy this year that we let 6 months go by without even a whisper. And so here we are at the 8-9 month mark whenever this comes out. And I used the word Mark there, not the name Mark, which can be confusing for those who normally hear me say now Mark, so they know that I'm addressing the other person on the podcast.
Right.
We're at the 9 months of year 5, and we're recording an update episode because we made a bold claim, my brother Mark, in the beginning of 2022. We released an episode, and I don't know if you remember the title of that episode or if you can share our listeners who maybe haven't heard it yet. But
if I am correct in my recollection, it was called No More Goals or Resolutions.
Which was bold because each of the following 4 years we had released a 2020 goals, 2018 resolution, like creative New Year's resolutions, I think was one of our episodes. Or we had 2 back-to-back episodes, Mark's resolutions, David's, like we were committed to resolving, to having goals and working towards things. Then we kind of did a 180 and we said, we're done having goals. We're done having resolutions. Now, for those of you who haven't heard that episode yet, stop what you're doing, go listen to it. It's not too far back. You just scroll back to January of 2022. But for those of you who have been listening, you'll understand we were at a point in our personal creative journeys that we both encountered this idea that said goals are fine. It's not bad to have goals. But when you write the goals down and look at those every day, you tend to get overwhelmed. You tend to get demotivated. You tend to get exhausted. You tend to get just kind of caught up in realizing that you're not anywhere close to that goal. And I have so much I could say about this, Mark. The idea of how far you'll get in 10 years versus 1 year. Mm-hmm. The idea of just consistency, the idea of show up every day for 2 years, because halfway through year 1, you realize it's going to take longer than 2 years, but you've developed the muscle of showing up. I don't know. What do you think about when you hear the fact that we got rid of all our goals and resolutions? And do you remember recording that? And anything you have looking back that you would regret or that you'd change or that you like about it?
I think at the time I had just listened to Scott Adams' book that was entitled, it's still in print. Sorry, it is entitled like How to Fail at Everything and Still Succeed, or something like that. How I Failed at Everything and Still Succeeded, or something like that. And in that book, he just talks. So he's a chapter or something on systems and how they're better than goals. And I kind of jumped on that idea, and I was like, this is a great idea. And I've taken steps to look into further resources to kind of articulate that more. I read a book that was basically all about that. And another book that mentioned it heavily. So it's started popping up more and more. So I've started seeing more and more overlapping information about that, which has been really helpful. But I think the biggest thing for me that has been helpful in switching from goals to systems or, habits, whatever language you use, is that in if I, get to the end of the goal, I don't want to quit doing the activity that's associated with the goal. So if it's like, okay, I want to win this award, well, what's more important to you, winning the award or being someone? So say it's a painting award. Do you want to win a painting award or do you want to be someone who paints? And finding uh, the enjoyment in doing the activity itself and letting that be the satisfaction. Oh, yeah, I painted today and I love painting. So therefore I accomplished my system, versus, well, I didn't win, whatever. I didn't win the plein air salon, or I didn't win this, or I didn't win that. It's like, that doesn't matter, because at the end of your life, do you want to be someone who won an award or someone who painted, that idea.
I love it. It's hilarious to me looking back because I think several of my resolution episodes, I was trying to accomplish this idea. My resolution was to read every day, write every day, draw every day, something along those lines. So I was resolving to institute a system, but I was going about it the wrong way, I think. I was going about it from a goal-oriented mindset where, like you said, once I had achieved the goal, what would be the outcome? I wasn't thinking big picture, what's it going to take in the short term to accomplish this big picture? It sounds like I'm talking in a loop there, but I've just been realizing more and more at work and at home and just with everything the Lord's been teaching me, it takes so much tiny incremental work to accomplish big things. Mm-hmm. And you just you'd be so surprised at yourself in a year what you could accomplish if you just worked on something a little bit every day for 365 days. I mean, imagine 365 days of anything. Like, imagine 365 days of drinking only water. Imagine how clear your skin would be. Like, just, it's true. But it takes those little incremental steps. And so we're kind of stopping in here end of the summer to just say we got rid of our goals and our resolutions. We put in some systems. I'm curious to hear from you, Mark, if you can identify any of those systems, or if it's hard to identify that they've just become part of life. And then just to kind of give a little bit of an update as to where we are personally. There's nothing to worry about the future of Arate at this point. Like, we're not making any announcement. This is just an update on what happened to the guys who got rid of their goals and systems. I wanted to start out by saying that I think I had some systems in place when we made that episode, and I just continued in them. I started to recognize them as systems, and then I started to forget that they were systems after a while, and it was just part of my daily routine. And that was really beneficial for me, as we'll find out in a minute. But I was curious, Mark, is there anything that you're like, this is a system that has to happen? Or are you like, oh, you know what, now that I think about it, this, and this is a system, but it's become part of my routine. It's become second nature.
I can't think of anything that I have really instituted as far as creative wise that has been different, as far as switching that mindset. But it has helped me, kind of like you're saying, see the world differently, where it's like, okay, like being in school, art school, that is something that is keeping me making things. Like, that is, and it's helped me with my students. Like, I'm like, with my students, should I be satisfied if they get an A in my class, or should I be satisfied if they keep creating after they leave school? Like that kind of idea, where it's like, just seeing what is already existing and seeing how these things already are systems, and then how I can, like, I was coming at them from a goal mindset. So I was like sprinting, burning out, sprinting, burning out, sprinting, burning out, versus if you're like, oh, wait, no, these are just systems that are, in place to help me keep making. And then as long as I'm doing assessments along the way, I will, kind of keep going with that. But I have noticed how the system of recording podcasts, week after week after week, and then doing interviews has really helped develop my skill simply through regular practice in communicating with others, knowing how to ask good questions, being a better listener. Not that I'm perfect, but like being a better listener, those sort of things. Those have definitely benefited me in terms of the system that we've created here on the platform. So anything for you, David?
So much that I could talk about, but it was kind of interesting for me to see. I don't know how to approach this, Mark. I'm figuring this out on the fly here because I've realized something as you've been talking. I think I'm going to start with this story, and then I'll go into what I've seen in here in 2022. I moved states in 2017 and started a job that I quite honestly hated. It was providing for my family. It was providing health insurance. It was paying my mortgage. But was I equipped to do it? Was I wired to do it? Was I desiring to do it? No, no. 3 strikes. I'm out. I was just showing up. But Mark, I've realized that I instituted a system for the first 6 months of that job that was creating a weekly YouTube video. It had to happen. And I am now realizing that I can look at time periods in my life where I did not have a creative system in place and I was frustrated. And I'm sure that and maybe even people listening have felt this way before, or someone who feels this way, where they are a frustrated creative because they don't feel like they're able to either sit down and produce what they want to produce, or they don't have time, or they're not producing at the level they want to be producing. And so then they stop producing for a while. And I'm just realizing that time in 2017, I was subconsciously instituting a system that was scratching an itch that I had that I could not identify at the time because I didn't have the language, I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the circle of influence that I have now. And then at the same time I did that vlog, we instituted the system of making the podcast. And the podcast is what has stayed. The vlog doesn't happen anymore on a consistent basis on the personal side. But that's crazy to me that I'm just now realizing that that is why us as creatives, whatever it is, if you're an illustrator, if you're a fine artist, if you're a writer, if you feel frustrated, check out your daily schedule and see where your system is if it's just 30 minutes, if it's just 15 minutes, whatever it takes to institute that system, because I bet you your frustration level will go down. And after a certain amount of time, faithfully doing it and comparing it, getting feedback, your skill level will go up. Because that's the blessing that I've experienced this year, is that I've moved into a role where I am now asked at work for pay to be involved in making a podcast and be involved in making video story. I mean, literally everything that Mark and I have ever said we wanted to do with this brand that we're on right now, I am being asked to do for my job, which I do not take for granted and have wept about already, and not going to do that here. Just like praising the Lord for his goodness and also praising him for his faithfulness in allowing me to develop a system that gave me the experience and the confidence to say, I can now do this for someone who expects this from me in return for money. I imagined, Mark, that would happen here on Arate, and I don't not imagine that it could someday, right? There's endless possibilities for Arate, but I think what's going to happen is in the next 12 months, you and I are going to decide what we want Arate to look like in 5 years, and we're going to put a system in place that, Lord willing, pushes us towards that. And then wherever we end up along the way will be, his will and the result of this system, right? Like, am I saying anything too off the wall here? And do you have anything to say about that idea of that itch or that desire or that frustration?
Yeah, I was talking to a friend of mine recently. I think you're right on with all of that. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and he was just saying how he is a maker. That's one thing that he's realized about himself, where he's like, if I didn't know how to do, drawing, whatever, I'd still be making something. I'd be building something. I just can't quit. It is like that idea of that itch that he has to scratch. And that was really encouraging to me. And it's also cool to hear, that, because as you were talking, I was thinking back and times where I've done like a Strata easel challenge, or like summer of 2020, I did a ton of paintings. Like I painted every day. I was going out plein air painting. Those are such it's like there's like a golden haze over those times, where I don't care how tired I was. I don't care. Like you look back and you're like, man, those I wish somebody would have told me, babe, that someday these would be the good old days. Like you're like, this is perfect, So it kind of fits really, really well in that idea of when I'm creating consistently is when I am, the most, like you said, the least frustrated. So I love that idea of kind of taking stock and looking at, how often are you creating? If you feel like you're that kind of person, where you're like, man, I'm just frustrated for some reason, because that to me is the beauty of the system, right? There's no award. There's no oh, I did this big thing and I accomplished this, whatever. It's no, I'm actually feeling really good because I made something today, so.
100%. I have 2 things to say about that. Number one, if you were created to be a maker and you feel frustrated, figure it out. Whatever in your life has to be sacrificed to make 10 minutes of time, 15 minutes of time. I mean, it sounds really cliche and like this sounds like a video you'd see on TikTok, right? Like or on Instagram, like this inspirational thing. But like I'm just if that's what you're called to do, if that's who God made you to be, and you're not finding a way to fulfill that, you don't have to be the best painter in the world. You don't have to be the best writer in the world, but just pray about how you can make time in your day to do that. Because I think that was such a blessing for me when I left my childhood city,
Mhm.
all of my favorite sports teams, all of my favorite restaurants, all the people I was familiar with. And I didn't move to a strange land, but I definitely moved to an area that is, not on my top 10 places to live in the world. And then started doing a job that I wasn't thrilled with. And I obviously see the Lord's hand in that now, but I don't look back on those first 12 months as being horrific because I watch those videos back and I'm like, oh man, that was such a fun time, or oh, that was such a crazy time. Like all the stories come back to my mind. The second thing I'll say is if you're someone who has someone in your life that is frustrated and you can make space for them to make things, I would encourage you to try to do that because I have someone in my life that blessed me with time and space to make things. And I'm so grateful because that was how they were able to love me. They could have loved me any number of ways and it would have been perfect and it would have been great and I would have received that. But for what the Lord has called me to do currently with my life, if you can do that for someone, if you can make space for them, or if you can help them see where that space is, or if you realize there's someone who needs to make with someone else, if you can make, I mean, Mark has made time for 4.5 years to make things with me. What a blessing. I am someone who needs to make things with people. Mark can spend 8 hours by himself making something and his tank is full. He's like, all right. He was telling me the other day, he said he's to get to spend 8 hours a day painting the summer. And at the end of the night, he was like, maybe I'll put together a puzzle or buy a Lego set.
Yeah.
Mark was fine. I would have been like, I have to talk to people. So anyways, I just wanted to give a shout out to my wife, to Mark, to the people that make things with me or make space for me to make things, because that's been a huge blessing. And I think that our listeners, if you see someone like that you can either make space for or make with, I think you could be a really blessing to that person in your life. And it would be a way for you to love them and a way for you to encourage them, because sometimes I think it can be hard for us to know how to encourage someone. Creatives have crazy ideas, especially when it comes out of their mouth. In our heads, it's great. We know exactly what it looks like. We visualize it. We know what it's going to take, or we don't know what it's going to take. We know what we imagine it will take. But to tell it to someone else is like, oh boy, I don't know if you've ever tried to explain something to somebody, Mark. You've tried to explain a painting or an idea. I have that trouble all the time. I'm constantly challenged to communicate my idea effectively so that the other person can put their mind around it. Yeah. And I don't know if you've experienced that, or if you have any tips for anybody listening that either has someone in their life that gives them weird things, or they're the one that has the weird things. I don't know.
No, that's what I have a friend who once told his painting teacher, he said, if I could explain the idea, I wouldn't have to paint. like he was like, I have to paint because the teacher was like, what's this idea? I don't understand. He's like, just let me paint it and I'll show it to you, because I get that. Yeah. Like trying to explain ideas. And then that sounded way better in my head. And I don't think that's quite, so I totally get that. I wanted to yes and you with the idea of like, basically like helping someone in your life be creative, or how to find time for yourself to be creative. Because I've heard a quote from a pastor who said, the will of God for your life is found in your limitations. And so like, I think for some of us, that means like, we think, oh, that means that I can't make stuff because my limitation is that I can't make stuff. It's like, no, that might be that the limitation is how you make stuff. So like for David and I, the limitation that we had was we weren't together. So therefore, calling each other on the phone and recording audio was a limitation where we found an avenue to make things together, right? We're like, we don't have $1 million. Well, podcasts are free. Okay, let's do that. So that's what I mean by that idea of like, you can find that creative outlet in even something that feels like a limitation. So like David said, maybe you only have 10 minutes a day to make something. But that all of a sudden is this super cool problem. Like, what's the coolest thing I could make in 10 minutes? That's all of a sudden something that is really cool. One book that I read that was really helpful is called Atomic Habits. And I really encourage you guys to read that if you don't. It hit me just at the right time. It was number 5 on the 5 times I needed to hear it, so it was really helpful. But one thing that I wanted to say practically, if you're like, okay, but how do I do that? One thing he says in the book is just the easiest way to implement a new habit is to simply stack it on top of a habit that you already have. So if you brush your teeth at the same time every day, or if you eat lunch at the same time every day, the easiest thing to say is, okay, whatever that regular habit is, so say it's brushing your teeth. After I brush my teeth, I will do this activity for 10 minutes. And it's a new activity that you've never done before. So say it's like, say maybe you want to maybe you're going to put Legos in bags, right? Like random Legos, handfuls, and you have 10 minutes to build whatever you can out of these Legos. So you say, okay, I've got my bags. So after I brush my teeth, I'm going to put one of my bags of Legos together for 10 minutes. And then he said that is such an easy way, because you already have that habit in place of brushing your teeth. You can just stack the new one on top, and you're almost guaranteed to do it more so than, okay, I think once I get this kind of thing in order, you're not creating space for it, because you're just stacking it on top of something that's already really solid and routine. And that has helped me a lot.
I love that idea. I'm thinking about a habit I'm trying to form right now and trying to figure out what I can stack it on. Mark, as we wrap up this episode, we don't want to be long-winded here and breaking our arms, patting ourselves on the back. I guess, what's the biggest thing that you would be grateful for these processes that Arete has taught us? Well, I guess I'll share after you, and you go first. And
I think the biggest thing that I've really enjoyed, or that's helped me, is, I say this because it's one of my weaknesses, and I'm very grateful that the Lord has placed this in my life specifically to like pound that, is like listening. I feel like I have made a small dent in the big weakness that is like my ability to listen. And so I'm really grateful for the podcast, even if it was like before we did interviews, whether it was David, we've always done a two-person, at least been two people on the pod. So learning to listen to him, and learning specifically how much I wasn't listening to him, like wasn't listening to what he was saying, and learning how to yes and do that sort of thing has been a big help for me. And then learning how to listen to people, and like with the interviews, and specifically ask questions and be interested in what they're interested in, and how to ask questions to people that really make them really communicate what I want to communicate, which is, I'm interested in you. I'm interested in what you have to say, but how to communicate that through questions. And so that has been a big help for me, because that is something that I can go to now, and it's transferred to kind of every area of my life, where if I'm ever like, Mark, you're being really selfish, like, maybe ask someone around you a question instead of a demonstrative statement. So that has been really helpful for me. And if I made like a list, I don't know where, if I made a top 5 list of things I've benefited from the podcast, I don't know where that would be on the list, but it's just the first thing that came to mind as we're wrapping up here.
Well, that's crazy, because if you are teaching, asking your students questions is probably a great way to know if they're learning.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys learning what I'm teaching you? I mean, that's an obvious question, but that's a great way. Then if you have friends, or if you have peers that you're creating with, or you're creating next to, you're both creating an oil painting, asking them questions is a great way to either express interest in them or help them figure out how to, what's Mark trying to learn right now. I mean, and then if you are taking a workshop, or you're in class there at school, or you're just talking on the phone with a mentor, obviously asking questions is the best way to, kind of download that knowledge from them and try to extract anything they can help you with. So, man, that's great. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah. What's yours?
I don't know. That's the hard part. I think that looking back at the storyteller that I was in 2017, and hopefully the storyteller that I am now and am still becoming, I think listening to our guests tell stories, and then intentionally studying story structure, and being more intentional with observing story in the media I'm consuming. And also, you know what? I will say this. The biggest thing that has helped me is to back off from being so critical when I consume someone else's story. I started out very, very critical. And if you listen to the first year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of the podcast, you will hear how critical I was of other people who are telling stories. And so I think the system of telling a story every other week for 4.5 years has really really been beneficial for me, at least in what I'm being asked to do in the next 12 to 24 months and beyond, and what I would like to do with my life going forward. So I'm really grateful for the people who have been patient enough to listen to Critical David. And Lord willing, I'm not as critical now as I was then. And it's hard because it's not that I'm not as critical, but I'm at least more willing and able to shut up about it. And also in the shutting up, I can actually try to appreciate the story, what the storyteller was trying to do, how they were trying to accomplish it, and just learn what is the best part of this movie I'm watching and how can I learn from that and apply it to my own stuff or compare it to others. And yeah, I think that's been the biggest benefit that I've seen. It's probably, like you said, I've got 5 to 10 things I could list, and it's probably not necessarily the first thing, but it probably should be. Well, for those curious, we have 3 interviews already in the can coming out in the next 6 weeks after this episode airs. So be looking forward to that. A corporate storyteller, a director, and a contemporary artist. And all of those conversations are great. Several of them, we were like, we need to have you back on tomorrow. We're like, can you come back on and talk with us again? Or could we have lunch with you? Or could we just come to your house and spend a week? And then for the rest of the year, we've got some very busy things happening in our personal lives. I've got a new member of my family joining me shortly. Mark has a big year of school ahead of him, his final year of at least this program study. He'll probably go back and get another. Mark is going to be perpetually in school. I'm convinced academia is too much of a lure for you, Mark.
That's it.
Go ahead.
Mom did say, she was like, I think you're going to be the family, student. And I was like, oh shoot, I was like, I don't know. I hope that works out for me.
Yeah. So hope I can afford it.
Right. Yeah. So I was like, I gotta do something for money eventually here, but
no, but we've got a lot of emails drafted to send to get recorded and be ready to keep you guys, Lord willing, please pray for us that we don't drop the ball on producing an episode every other week, at least for the next 4 months. Until I, come back from the whirlwind that will be my life changing and turning upside down. Everybody keeps telling me everything's about to change. I'm like, everything changes every day. Right? I didn't know that part of my body existed, but now it hurts.
Yeah.
I'm 32. But yeah, so just pray for us as we go through this season of our lives. And the Lord's been faithful to us in busy seasons before with the podcast. And I know that he will make a way. So just keep your eyes peeled. Mark, best way for folks to catch new episodes? Why don't you start there?
Yeah. So the best way to catch new episodes would be through subscribing to us on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. YouTube is a great option because a lot of times, especially the visual storytellers that we have on, they're always trying to show things to the camera. Like we've had people show us thousands of dollars worth of artwork, or
the Mike Malm showed us this room-sized painting that was behind
that's in progress. Yeah. So we've in the background of these episodes is just some of the most crazy things. So it's
free, the entire episode's free on YouTube.
Right. So it is really fun. And so with some of the visual storytellers, they really like to show things behind us. Also, YouTube is just fun. I'm always really interested just to see what people have behind them. I'm always like, wow, what a neat little window into that person's life, So YouTube is a great option for subscribing to us. But there's also just the audio versions that you can do. I know sometimes people are on the go and it's distracting to listen to the YouTube ones. So, but you can leave us a comment or a review with your favorite part of the show on any of those platforms, and that's really helpful. That helps the algorithm know that you enjoyed us, and our good friend the algorithm. We're always there. The algorithm, I will tell you what, as a friend, kind of toxic. Not gonna lie. I don't know.
Knows way too much.
Right. No.
Pushes the wrong buttons.
Yeah. Knows way too much. Tells people that you didn't want to know the thing that you just told them. So yeah, as a friend, not the best, but they're connected to great people. They always give great birthday gifts. So we're keeping them in the loop for now, and we'll keep you posted on that. But David, where else can people find us?
You can search the Creative Community Podcast or Destination Arte on all those platforms, but then to follow our brand on social media, it is Destination Arte, Arete. So just put an @ sign on there. And Facebook and Instagram is where we update the most frequently. if you guys want to expand to another community platform like Discord or Twitter or something, please let us know. I have the bandwidth for Discord, maybe, and I don't know if that would serve a large subset of our audience or a small subset. So right now, Instagram is the most active audience, but I realized the other day, Mark, we're at almost 150 folks on Facebook. So that community is growing. We're at almost 120 folks on YouTube. So that community continues to grow. And then Instagram also, we get new followers all the time. So yeah, I would say Destination Arte on social media, great place to connect with us and to let us know if this episode was helpful, if a previous episode was helpful. I love getting DMs and getting just information from folks and connecting with them that way. So, Mark, the last way for people to connect with us, and I think probably, Lord willing, in the future, the most valuable way is the newsletter. So tell people what they can expect in the newsletter. You receive the newsletter, I think.
I do.
So as a newsletter subscriber yourself, give us a little, Yelp review of this process.
So the newsletter is great. As someone who is creating this content, it is great to be reminded what we did, because I forget. I'm just kidding. but I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. I forget that we did that. No, David does a great job putting the newsletter together for us. And it is the first people to get, like David will send out like, hey, here's the episodes we have coming out, those sort of things. So you can kind of put that on your calendar, be knowing what to expect as far as that goes. It tells you if we have upcoming events or if we're working on projects, those sort of things, sneak peeks behind the scenes. It's just, if you want to say, hey, I really enjoy what you guys do, and I want to kind of be on the front lines of receiving content, being, on your guys' corner, then the newsletter is the best way to do that.
Awesome, Blossom. Well, for those of you out there who are instituting processes, please let us know. Please let us know if you've done that since the beginning of time, since you did that since the beginning of 2022. If you're doing it tomorrow, I always say, like, today could be day one, which would mean tomorrow is day two, which is more than one. Like, it's really, once again, I sound like this cliche Gary V impersonator, but if today is day one, I think that is awesome, because it's never too late to start. You're never too old. You're never too whatever you think you are too much of. The Lord can use what he has put in your heart if you have committed it to him and you're trying to honor him with it. And honoring him with it means working it out, exercising it, figuring out what it looks like. And Mark, it might take someone, it could take us another 10 years to figure out what this brand is. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's a failure. I don't even think that us not continuing this podcast at a certain point would be a failure if we were to then replace this process with another one. Mm-hmm. I think that us quitting this podcast and not replacing this process now, I'm not saying we would have to be making something together all the time, but if you and I did not replace this podcast with a process that pushed us closer to the ideal image of what God had in mind for us when we were born, then I think that would be the failure part. So for those of you out there who feel like a failure, it's not too late to become a success by just simply instituting this process today, tonight, tomorrow. Start now, and let us know what the Lord does in your life. We want to know. So with that being said, we'll be back in 2 weeks with an interview, and we'll see you guys then.